When the Suns traded for Bradley Beal, I'm sure a lot of people immediately questioned the fit. You already have two elite scorers in Booker and Durant, who both do a lot of their damage in the mid-range. So is adding a third one really gonna move the needle? I know my mind went there, but the more I think about Beal's overall skill set and what went wrong for Phoenix in last year's playoffs, I actually feel that there are some things he brings to the table that are a lot more important than people seem to think. I mentioned the mid-range, and Beal is one of the game's most lethal assassins, getting to any spot inside the arc and just torching defenders through his versatile shot making. And what stands out to me is the vast amount of ways in which he can create these looks. Out of any play type, out of any scenario, he's got the counters and the skill set to generate space seemingly at will. In isolation, it's his ability to change speeds that helps him gain that separation. He's got a quick burst off the dribble that threatens a drive, and when his defender shifts his momentum to get to the paint, just as quickly as he sped up, he slams the brakes and pulls back into a now open jumper. In my breakdown of what makes Shai so impossible to defend in isolation, I talked about ankle flexibility and weaponizing length to create mid-range jumpers, and you see a lot of the same things with Beal. All of his momentum is going towards the basket, but because his body allows him to plant his feet at awkward angles while still remaining in complete control, the speed at which he can pull back into a shot makes it really tough to cover. He's also pretty bulky and strong for his size, so for even more separation on jumpers, he can use his off arm or shoulder to go into the chest of his defender while pulling back, and as long as the floor is spaced, he's gonna create quality looks. A lot of Beal's opportunities also come in the pick and roll, where he's real patient, often looking to put his defender in jail and probe with his live dribble as he plays the in-between game. On this one, the right corner is unoccupied, so he's gonna throw a left-hand shoulder bump into an exaggerated right-hand sidestep, and the only way his man can recover to contest is by fouling. Here it is again, coming off the screen and immediately putting his body in between his defender and the big man, so that now the play becomes a brief one-on-one between him and a much slower-footed player, jabbing at the paint before stepping back into a jumper on the elbow. So you've got perimeter isolation, the pick and roll, and another way he'll consistently get into mid-range jumpers is away from the ball, often curling off of screens in set actions. The reason he's so effective in these spots is that he can make quick reads off the catch if jumpers aren't there right away. Kobe White's able to effectively dodge the screen and remain right in front of Beal, so he drops a shoulder into the chest while spinning back for some separation, throws that straight into an up fake to get White out of position before stepping through for a little push shot from about 8 feet out. Just for some perspective on how much damage Beal is capable of doing in these spots, of the 26 players who attempted at least 160 long twos last season, he was 4th in accuracy at about 49%. The 3 players he landed behind were Joel Embiid, and both of his new star teammates Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Now, the obvious thing to bring up would be diminishing returns. Too much of one particular thing doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to keep moving the needle. Book and KD can both isolate from anywhere on the floor, run the pick and roll, and fly off of screens to create in the mid-range whenever they want. But there's only one ball, and especially in the case of a less efficient area of the floor, it's true that stacking them together makes it a little bit less valuable. But something that I think is really important to keep in mind is what ultimately turned out to be the fatal flaw of Phoenix during the 2023 playoffs. They went up against an offensive powerhouse in Denver, led by a center who's not a very good rim protector. But there's no real way to take advantage of that if you can't get to the rim. Chris Paul averaged 0.4 shots at the rim per game last season and shot 46%. He might have actually been the worst player in the NBA at this particular skill. Because Kevin Durant's lost some burst with the injuries and he's got a loose handle, he's another who really isn't getting to the rim anymore, instead cutting drives short to pull up for mid-range jumpers over the top. Devin Booker's really good at applying pressure in semi-transition or when running with pace, but lacks the burst or length needed to consistently touch the paint in a slower, half-court setting. The only real interior presence they had in the half court at all was DeAndre Ayton on a roll, and with proper scheming and personnel on the backline, it's a lot easier to take those opportunities away than a ball handler getting there with a live dribble. As a result, Phoenix was dead last in the playoffs in field goal attempts at the rim, and it's not even remotely close. They were under 14.5 a game, and the second worst was Brooklyn at over 18. Just for perspective, all 4 of the conference finalists landed at around the 22 to 23 range. Consistent rim pressure also collapses the defense and leads to high quality threes. Only one team in the playoffs was under 33 point attempts per game. The Suns had about 26. This right here is where Bradley Beal makes his biggest impact on the team, because they didn't have a single player on the roster who could consistently get to the rim in the half court, particularly from a standstill, and he brings that to the table. I talked about how he uses sharp changes of speed to create space in the mid-range. Well, that also enables him to burst downhill, consistently beating the first line of defense. He'll use hesitations and pauses to freeze defenders before taking that first step. By hanging that left-hand dribble, he can either cross back over or burst right out of it, and he's able to get around Holiday with ease on his way to a wide open lay. Here's another example of that exact same left-hand hanging hesitation, except this time Caruso bites, so he's going to use the crossover and drive right. A lot of guys would see a packed paint and stop at about the free throw line for a pull-up jumper, but Beal's comfortable going directly at the big and using contact to create a higher percentage look. He's a versatile finisher, comfortable going to all types of different angles or releases. This time Embiid's camped under the basket, waiting to meet him vertically, so he jump stops into a floater over the top. Floaters are a pretty big part of his game. Last season, he shot over 46% in that 3 to 10 foot range, and while that does include some short jumpers, I do think it's a great counter he has for more aggressive paint defense. Another thing you'll see is that he'll weaponize the threat of his jump shooting to open up more drives, here stepping back into a hesitation to pull Brown to the perimeter before taking off on a drive, and putting a high arc on the inside hand finish so that Derek White can't get to it. And this works both ways. The threat of slashing also gives him more access to the mid-range. When he takes that first step, Gobert is forced to overcommit to the paint, so he just steps back into a high-quality jumper. That last play started from a complete standstill, and I think because of Beal's first step, he's someone who can consistently get to the rim in these spots. He'll use jabs and pivots to almost disguise when he's going to put the ball on the deck, and by that time it's usually too late for defenders to recover. This one's all the way out on the perimeter, jabbing left a couple times before aggressively ripping through into a drive right, and notice how instead of looking to carve out a crafty angle, he jumps directly into the body of a shot blocker while attempting to finish, which results in a 3-point play. Because of his strength, he's comfortable initiating and scoring through contact, so he's always looking for opportunities to jump into rim protection like this, first using a shoulder bump to discard his defender, then flying right into the chest of Miles Turner while keeping the ball high and away so that he can protect it until its release. Seeking out contact is a great way to generate free throws, and I think due to a decline in athleticism, he's not quite as prominent in this regard as he was a few years ago, but last year he still got to the line for about 5 attempts every 75 possessions, enough to land him in the 80th percentile. Another thing to keep in mind is that next to Booker and Durant, he'll often be drawing the opposing team's number 3 defender and the smallest body. And he's someone who will use his size to abuse mismatches, so I think we could potentially see another uptake in his free throw rates. Just to add some more numbers on this area of his game, he averaged 10.6 points in the paint. That's more than names like Anthony Edwards, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, and Zach LaVine, some real notable slashers, so it's clear that he can pressure this area of the floor with consistency. And considering he shot about 72% at the rim, he's doing it on high efficiency as well. This sort of rim pressure is also a great way to draw in the defense and free up teammates. Notice how when he gets to the paint, Porzingis isn't properly spaced. but by taking just one extra dribble underneath the basket that buys him time to flash out to the perimeter, and now he's left with a wide open triple. He doesn't make a ton of advanced reads, but I do think he has decent vision and an understanding on how to punish defenses for loading up. When he gets to the elbow, he makes direct eye contact with Kyle Kuzma, so when he spins back towards the baseline, he knows to look for him on a weak side cut, and the result is an easy 2 points at the rim. He's really good at using those changes of speed to run his defender into screens, and because of the slashing threat, he'll often draw more aggressive coverages, so in the high pick and roll, he's usually able to create advantages at decent volume. Here's one of those examples where he comes off the screen and patiently reads the defense while keeping his dribble alive, and because Plumlee's in a hedge and recover, he waits for the retreat before making his attack, which collapses the entire defense and leaves Corey Kispert open on the weak side for a spot-up 3. This time he's going to come off the screen with a little more speed, forcing Ayton to commit to the ball, and because there's so much space in the middle of the floor, he's comfortable shoveling it to Gibson on the roll. But in tighter spaces, he will miss those higher leverage opportunities. Vucevic is up near the level with Caruso on his hip, and the shovel is there, creating a really easy advantage for his team to attack, but he doesn't find it and is instead forced to rely on a tougher shot that he ends up hitting anyways. Here's another where he draws an extra body as his teammate backdoors, and it's a tight window, but a higher level passer would turn this into an easy layup. He ends up driving and touching the paint himself, but isn't able to convert down low. Sometimes he can find high leverage passes, but his accuracy isn't always on target. After receiving a handoff, he draws 2 to the ball and pulls back while staring down the weak side wing. That's to manipulate CJ McCollum, as he instead throws a no-look lob right into the heart of the defense. The idea is great and still results in an efficient shot, but it could have been more precise. Because of these issues, when he does start to get a ton of touches, he can be a bit turnover prone, just failing to connect on some of those tougher finds. Another limitation of his is that he's not actually a very good off-the-dribble 3-point shooter at all. Since 2021, he's hit just 31% of those opportunities. He's confident taking them against deep drop coverage in the pick and roll, or as a fallback option in isolation, but it really isn't a big part of his game, and defenses won't treat it like that. So, because he doesn't have that third level threat, when paired with some of his deficiencies as a playmaker, I don't really view him as someone who should be running the offense, which is why I think throughout his career, he's looked best in those situations where he's not the lead creator, like when he played with John Wall or Russell Westbrook. Beal's overall package as an inside-the-arc scorer who can leverage that threat to some extent is enough for him to run the offense for consistent stretches when needed, especially against bench units, but in Phoenix he's the number 3 guy, so I think a lot of his time will be spent away from the ball. Lucky for the Suns, he just so happens to be a phenomenal off-ball player. I mentioned how he'll come off of screens and set action to get to the mid-range, but he's also really decisive off the catch and can easily turn those into paint touches. It's one thing to go through the motions, but making reads on the fly and countering different coverages makes it that much tougher to defend. When Oubre goes under the screen, he uses that to his advantage by changing directions and instead attacking open space on the left. There, he's able to create a driving lane that results in the defense collapsing, and he finds a skip pass over the top that leads to a quality corner 3 for Kuzma. It's not just after the catch where he'll counter, but through his sharp movement. Emmanuel quickly is going to look to front the screening action, so Beal goes through the motions to set him up before darting backdoor, and then you see that aggression leading to a pair of free throws. Because he's such a smart mover and capable of making quick decisions on the fly, he's absolutely incredible at playing the dribble handoff game. He can attack in either direction, cut off of screens, counter different coverages, and I think this is a big deal because the Suns just added Jusuf Nurkic, and that's his entire game. The best way to maximize a big like Nurk, who can screen and pass at a high level, is with him initiating in the middle of the floor and running 2-man action, and having a guy like Beal really helps unlock that. Another thing you get with Beal is much improved spacing. I know I said he's not a great off the dribble 3-point shooter, but he is much better off the catch. Not someone who's going to fly off of screens and knock down triples on the move, but as a spot up, he's a big threat to finish plays and someone the defense has to respect. Since 2021, he's hit 41% of his wide open threes, and he's comfortable knocking down from every spot on the arc, so he'll definitely open up the floor for guys like KD and Book to attack. Just to throw some more numbers at you, last season Beal averaged about 26 points every 75 possessions on efficiency about 1% ahead of the league's average. It's important to remember that this was as the lead creator and offensive focal point. A lot of his time spent on the court will be against either the number 3 defender in starting or closing lineups, or against bench units as he staggers with the 2 other stars. Less defensive attention, easier opponents, and more off-ball utility should get his efficiency up, not just as a scorer, but in cutting down on the turnovers. The only real question I have is health. Beal hasn't played more than 60 games in a season since 2019, so it is somewhat of a gamble to put so much trust in him. But if Phoenix finds themselves fully healthy heading into a playoff series, that offensive firepower is really something serious. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the new look Suns. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.